Welcome to Pro Tools Expert, my name's Dan Cooper. In this free video tutorial series, I'm going to show you how you can mix a full band production mix using Waves plugins. It's quite a sizable session this, we've got about 50 tracks, live multi-track drums, percussion, bass guitar, quite a few electric guitars, backing vocal arrangements as well, and a lead vocal. Now let's have a quick listen to some of the sections in this song. All I've got going here at the minute is the static mix, so no processing whatsoever.
Town, the beast is loose. Amsterdam, Berlin, Toulouse. She's out to bewilder and abuse anyone that's in her way.
Let's jump to the chorus.
And she'll say, hey, come out and play.
Something quite rocky, and over to the bridge. Got quite a few of these backing vocals being introduced here. All in all, very nice song. Now, I wasn't the one responsible for tracking this. Sadly, the multi-track drums were chopped up and snapped to the grid, and at times you can hear that, which is a bit of a shame, but we are going to crack on and use these drums anyway. So in this tutorial series, we're going to start with mixing the drums, and in future videos, we're going to look at the bass guitar, the electric guitar arrangement, the backing vocals, and of course, the lead vocal. So starting with those drums, let's just put them in isolation. Now, they sound okay. They've got some issues. The snare drum is quite lively. You can hear there's quite a few overtones in that. The ringing is a bit much for this song. The kick drum is a little bit flabby, it's not really defined enough, and there's quite a lot of splash in those hi-hats as well. Stereo overheads, kick in, snare top, and two toms. We've got those outputted by bus 1 and 2 into a stereo auxiliary track, and we've got some sends already put up there for some reverb, but we'll get to those in a minute. Let's start with that kick drum. Put it in isolation first. Not great. Sounds a little bit boxy. Let's see what we can do with some EQ. Now, this is Waves F6. Very powerful EQ this. It's also dynamic EQ, but we're not going to be using the dynamic section in this. We're just going to see if we can use this to get the character of the drum a bit better. It's a pretty typical EQ curve this for kick drums. Something up here in the upper mids to bring the click out, something around about 500 hertz to bring the boxiness out, and something in the lows to help bring out the fundamental of the kick hits. Let's hear how this sounds. Hear that alongside the overheads. Sounds good, might bring this up a little bit more. Much better. Now let's throw on an 1176 after that. Got the attack and release times up the middle, so nothing too quick or nothing too lazy. And yeah, I'm hitting this quite hard. But it's doing the job. Now, if we move over to those overheads, you may have noticed that there were a couple of bands in there that are ringing through a little bit too much. I've already identified these, band 3 and 4. If I exaggerate these, so increase the gain, you'll hear what I'm on about. There's something in that snare that was ringing through, and all this has done, these tight notches, is help to reduce them a little bit in the overall picture of the drums. So take out a bypass, you can hear this a little bit more clearly, and then I'll take it out of bypass. Listen for that snare. It's worked quite well. Now, those hi-hats are a little bit harsh in my ears. DeEssers are great for reducing harshness. Now, just going to take this out of bypass. I'm going to audition the sidechain so we can hear just that whistling top end. Got a good set of headphones on, you'll hear this. Right, something like that. Fair amount of reduction going on. Before. That sounds nice, sounds a little bit more focused. Now let's move across to that snare drum. Now, as I pointed out earlier, this does sound quite lively. So F6 again to the rescue. 3 bands this time, 3 notches and a low cut in there as well. But let's focus on these 3 notches. Again, let me just exaggerate these a little bit so you can hear those overtones more clearly. First in bypass. All of this is upsetting my ears. I don't like it. So real simple. Once you've found the frequencies that are troublesome, tight Q, bring the gain down. Something like that. This one sounds like it can come down a little bit more. Take it out of bypass. Now, in isolation, that snare doesn't sound great, but in with the overheads and the kick, sounds much, much better. Again, let's follow this up with an 1176. Nice and snappy on the attack and release timings there. And a fair amount of gain reduction going on as well, just to thicken that snare, just to give it a bit more attitude. Works lovely. Now, let's move across to the toms. In isolation first, of course. You can hear the shells rumbling, you can hear the bleed from the other parts of the kit. It's to be expected, these are tom channels. And I'm going to keep this really simple, an instance of audio track on each, and I'm just going to use the gates, so threshold and release times, just so that we can hear just the toms. Top tip when you're using a noise gate on toms, the secret sauce is always going to be in the release timings. If it's too long, you run the risk of getting extra hits following the tom coming into the channel, so things like snares and crashes and that. But if it's too short, you run the risk of sounding like Phil Collins. So let's hear how this sounds with this gate setting. Pretty good. Before. Let's have a look, listen to those drums, hear if we need to do any more processing. Right, that snare track, quite a lot of bleed from the hi-hats. I'm going to use a DeEsser as my first inset here, and I'm going to be quite brutal just to tame that top-end harshness from those hats. So let's take this out of bypass. Really go for it. I know I'm affecting the top end of the snare, but I'm happy to make that compromise. Yeah, that's that splash I don't like. Okay, let's jump back over onto those overheads and put back some of that top end now. Sounds good. Right, let's now introduce some reverb to that snare, and I've got bus set up here, called it short plate, going over to this stereo auxiliary, and on this I've got an instance of Verb. Renaissance Verb. Very cool plugin this, very easy to use, and I've just got a preset loaded up on this called Small Dark Plate. Just going to put the bass in for context here, and let's wind this in and find a good level for the reverb. Right, what I find is that when I start to hear the reverb, that tells me that I've dialed in too much. So it's a good idea to start to turn things down and see if you can get the reverb sitting in there subtly as though it's part of the room instead of it being, you know, an obvious effect thrown on top. That's nice. Now, let's put a little bit on those toms as well, and I think we can get away with something a little bit more than the snare has. Yeah, why not? That adds a certain colour to the toms that works nicely. Now let's have a look at the drum submix here now. SSL Compressor. Can't go too far wrong with this at all. Just there to glue the overall picture of the drums together. Never want to go too far with this. Like that. You want to be more subtle. Always find a slow attack, quick release. Works for me. Now let's add some interest to these drums. I'm going to use Waves Vitamin, or Vitamin, depending on which side of the pond you live. Waves described this as a sonic enhancer. Very easy to use, and all we do is move these faders up, use our ear, and have fun. Let's listen to this. It's nice, maybe bring out a bit more of the top end. The 4. Yeah, works very well this. Excellent. Right, in the next video, we're going to be taking a look at the bass guitar, and in future videos, the electric guitars and the backing vocal arrangements, and of course, the lead vocal. Anyway, I hope you guys got something from this video. I'm Dan from Pro Tools Expert, and I'll see you again soon.